Hello everybody, I'm Nick, and in this video I'm going to show you a really cool way to run migrations for your .NET applications without having to use anti-framework core. Now, there's nothing wrong with EF core, I think it's an excellent library, but I personally like to control my SQL completely end-to-end, and for that reason I'm using Dapper and then usually Postgres because that's my favorite RDBMS. So for me, it's been really hard to run migrations consistently through my code, because I need to have them basically in code, and that's all fine and it can be versioned and nice, but wouldn't it be also nice to have an experience like EF Core, but also make it easy to run it and manage it and so on? And there's been a tool I've been using for a long time now, and I finally want to make a video on it. And that tool is DbUp. Now let me show you what I have here. I have a simple API, it's a customer's API, it has a bunch of endpoints regarding managing a customer, so you can create, delete, update, and retrieve a customer, a very basic CRUD REST API. And if I go into the database folder, what you're going to see is I have this database initializer class. Now, all this class is doing is on startup, the last thing before the application is run is we're resolving this service from the app services, and then we just call the initialize async method. And in here, all I have is an execute async script that just creates my table. It assumes the database has been created already and then creates a table. Now, if I want to add a migration here, what I kind of have to do is copy this over here, go here, and then let's say I want to change this table called customers to also add a GitHub username column, because I also want to store the GitHub username, which is part of the logic of this application. Well, what I would have to do is say alter table, then customers, add GitHub username, and it's a text, not null. And if I do that and make sure that my database is up and running, and I actually have to go ahead and manually create my database called MyDB over here for all this to work, but assuming I do that, I'm going to stick a breakpoint here, I'll go ahead and run this API. And as you're going to see, on startup, we're going to come in here and then my database will be created. Now, when I just had the create table, you can see that I'm using the if not exists. So this will only create a table if that table doesn't exist already, which makes it deterministic. I can run it as many times as I want, and it's not going to crash or tell me that the table already exists because I have the if not exists. Now, in this case, it doesn't exist. So I'm just going to run those two things. And as you're going to see, if I go to Postgres, now, if I refresh and select my database and then select my schema, which is going to be the public one, then as you'll see, I have my customers table with all the columns, including the GitHub username. And that is perfect. In that way, I have migrations now in my application. But if I go ahead and I run it again, you're very quickly going to see that I don't have an if not exists check for the alter table. And what this will do is, of course, it's going to cause an exception because the column already exists. So that kind of sucks. Now, this wouldn't be a problem with EF Core because EF Core makes a table to track all the migration it has run already. And if it has run a migration, it wouldn't cause this problem. I should also point out, by the way, that running your migrations through your application during startup is not necessarily the best practice, especially when you scale your application out, because that can lead to issues with multiple applications or multiple instances running migrations at the same time. I usually have an application dedicated to running migrations, and usually I containerize it so that container runs first, and then once that container finishes running, then my main application will start, and all that is handled with Docker Compose. But just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to run everything through my application. So that is all functional for the first time, and I could technically just have a check that says if column exists, don't run this query. I don't want to overcomplicate on migrations though, because this just makes it very, very hard to manage. So is there a way to do this better? Well, there is. Now, before I move on, I'd like to let you know that we just launched our summer sale on DomeTrain. So until the 14th of July, you can use discount code SUMMER24 at checkout to get 30% off any of our 35 courses. And I'm happy to announce that DomeTrain has partnered with Microsoft, and we brought you DomeTrain Pro, our annual offering, as a Visual Studio benefit. So check the link in the description as well to see if you qualify for it. There's a table down in the description as well showing which subscriptions qualify for the benefit because not all of them do. But if you do qualify for it, it is the best value you ever gonna find on DomTrain. And massive thanks to Microsoft for partnering with DomTrain. Now back to the video. So first what I'm going to do is I'm going to just delete the database. Drop my DB. I want it to basically not exist. I'm going to just disconnect and delete that connection. And then I'm going to just very quickly reconnect to that database. I'm going to say that this is a Postgres database. And as you can see, my DB does not exist. And I'm going to just first delete all the migration stuff from here. I don't want them. Go away. I don't want to run migrations in that way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a Nuget package called DbUp. Now, DbUp is the library that will allow us to manage our migrations. And as you can see over here, if I scroll down, there are some packages specific to the database you are using. In my case, it's Postgres. So I'm going to add DbUp-PostgreSQL as the Nuget package. And once I add that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say private read-only string connection string. And I'm going to inject the database connection string. So I'm going to have to go back to my code and rewire the DB initializer to, instead of being automatically initialized, say new DB initializer and then pass the connection string, because my migrations will need that connection string to, well, connect the database, right? So I'm going to do that, and that's the only registration change I'm going to make. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in the database folder and I'm going to create a scripts directory. And this is where I'm going to put my migration scripts. They're not going to be C# scripts, they're going to be SQL scripts, but they're going to be versioned with my application. So I'm going to go ahead and create my first file, and I'm going to replicate what I had before. So I'm going to say create tables.sql as the very first script, and I'm going to put the initial create table if not exists. In fact, I don't even need the if not exists anymore because this will only run once, no matter how many times I run my migrations. So that is now here. And then I'm going to create my second migration, and that is going to be script to add username. And this will only include the alter table customers add GitHub username. And that is it. Now my migrations are here. And what I have to do for DbUp to pick them up is I'm going to say, and this is just one of the approaches you can take with this, but it's sort of the default approach. So what I'm going to say is that these should now be embedded resources embedded in my assembly. And once I do that, then I can go to my DB initializer and write my initializer code. The first thing I want to do is I want to ensure the database, the fact that the database itself exists. So ensure database for, and then it detects I have the PostgreSQL Nuget package. So I'm going to say PostgreSQL database, and I'm going to give it a connection string. So I'm just going to pass down the connection string. I don't need to say which database I want because my connection string already has it. It's going to pick that up and create it with the appropriate name. And then I can say that var upgrader, and that's the object I'll be able to use to run the migrations. So upgrader equals deploy changes to PostgreSQL database with that connection string. And then I can change all my configuration. So I can say without transaction, without a filter, with transactions, I can log to different mediums, and I can load my scripts from different places. So what I'm going to do as the default approach here is say with the scripts embedded in assembly, and then I'm going to point at my assembly. I could just say assembly.get executing assembly, but I want to be more specific. I'm going to say that get the assembly where the type database initializer exists in. So this is what this .assembly will do. And then I'm going to say log to console just so I can see what's happening. And then I'll say build. So a very simplistic setup. And then I'm going to say if upgrader is upgrade required. So if I have migrations to run basically that I haven't already run, then go ahead and perform the upgrade. And you can actually get the result to that upgrade too. And that's it. That's all you need to do to run your migrations. These will be automatically detected because there will be SQL files embedded in the assembly. So if I go ahead and I just show you again, I don't have my database at all, let alone any scripts. So I'm just gonna run this, I'm gonna let it build. And then the first thing I wanna do is I wanna ensure that the database exists. So I'm gonna step over this and this will create the database. If I refresh now, I can see my DB exists. I'm going to expand, and then I'm going to load the public schema. I have no tables at this point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to initialize the upgrader, and then I'm going to say, hey, is upgrade required? Yes, it is. Okay, go ahead and perform the upgrade. And that, the moment I refresh, will show me that I have two tables now. I have the customers table, which is the full table with both migrations run. And I also have the schema versions, because this library will also track which migration has run, and it's going to also store the script name. So you have to be very careful to not rename or move those files, because there's a check based on the file itself too. So now this will just be managed. And if I let the application run, and in fact, I'm going to show you the results as well, you're going to see which two scripts were run and the fact that it was successful. If there was an error, I would be able to get the error as the exception and the error script, and then I can let it run and my application is running successfully. Now, if I stop it and I run it again, what you're going to see is that a database won't be recreated because, well, we've already created it through the previous running. And same with the upgrader. It's going to say, hey, is upgrade required? Nope, it's not going to do anything. And it's just going to run. And then when I want to add an extra migration, script 0003, give it a name, and then this will be managed by DbUp. It's a very small utility, but so incredibly useful, and you don't have to subscribe to the whole EF Core concept. I know many people use EF Core just for the migrations capability. And to be fair, I get the point, because you have your C# code and that just makes migrations according to those changes. But if you know your SQL and you're not scared to just write your own migrations, this is an excellent approach in my opinion, and it's what I am using. But now I wonder from you, what are you using for migrations, and were you aware of DbUp? Are you using maybe another Nuget package? Leave a comment down below, let me know. Well, that's all I had for you for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, keep coding.